Welcome back to Free Founders, where we share actionable lessons from the world's best solopreneurs and small business owners. This is for aspiring entrepreneurs who want proven strategies to go from zero to first sale and onwards to scale and enjoy the freedom that comes along with it. My guest today is Rob Brightwell. Rob has spent his career in product, been a head of product for the last 4 years. He's actually very early in his entrepreneurial career. In April, launching his first business idea, took it from zero to first 4 sales within a couple of days, working with me, in fact, in this case, and has made a huge pivot in his career this year. And that's what I really want to talk about today. So in this episode, expect to learn why a career change can make a huge amount of sense for some people. And secondly, how to mitigate risk and sort of think about exploring new ideas, exploring new career paths along that journey. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Emery. Thanks for having me.
So, we've spoken a lot. I looked at, your CV, LinkedIn, etc. But you've had a very conventional CV. You spent 16 years climbing the product career ladder. You get to the top as head of product 4 years ago, and you quit the product world entirely. Why?
I think, for quite some time, I've just been feeling uninspired and disillusioned to a degree with my career and product. As you say, I've, spent 16 or so years kind of climbing that ladder. I've actually been working in and around tech even a bit longer than that. And I remember very early in my career that being very compelling, very fun, and really enjoying that. And it's been quite a long time since I've felt as much drive, as much hunger as I felt in the first part of my career. For the last, quite a few years, a lot of the work that I've been doing has really just kind of felt like the same thing. It might be for different companies, it might be on slightly different products or different parts of a product. But at the end of the day, it's kind of constantly tweaking funnels, trying to look for a percentage increase here and there. How can I move a few more people through this stage of a sign-up process, etc. Managing stakeholders, trying to align everybody and gain support for a particular direction that I think we need to go in. Large amounts of time spent on things that really don't matter, on going to meetings about perhaps unimportant things that are not going to move the dial, and it just felt really samey. It felt like Groundhog Day, if I'm honest. And then I think, my health was suffering as a result of that. So feeling tired, feeling drained all the time, feeling exhausted at the end of the day, mentally drained, having this kind of brain fog, like I don't have energy to, have a good time to spend with my wife, to have a conversation, that type of thing. I was getting a lot of migraines, feeling quite low at times, low mood and so on. And life just felt one-dimensional, if I'm honest. I was giving so much of my energy Monday to Friday to this job, to this career, that I didn't really feel like I had anything left at the end of it. So that's a feeling I've had for a little while now, and I think probably over the last year or two, it's got much more acute. And there was a period in my career where I felt that the problem was I'm just not in the right place. I'm just not at the right company. I just need to find the right company. So I spent 11 years, kind of first 11 years that I worked in and around tech, working in fashion retail companies. And then when I left that world, I got into startups, and I went through a succession of startups, and each one that I went to was kind of dysfunctional in its own unique way. I won't go into details, but every single one, there was something about it that in some cases was highly dysfunctional. And that just felt like rolling the dice, You go through a huge amount of effort to change to a different company, to find a company. you do lots of interviews, you spend lots of time doing research and this type of thing. And the cycle time, if you like, something we think a lot about in products. What's my feedback loop, my time to learn on these things, but incredibly long, right? When you add up the time that you go from being disillusioned to looking for a new job to then starting a job and getting to the point where you realize this is not the one, it's 12 to 18 months. I mean, you don't have many blocks for 12 to 18 months in your life to keep rolling the dice on these different companies. Is this going to be the one that, makes me feel great and makes me feel like I'm doing inspiring, worthwhile work? And I think I just kind of ran out of steam for that process.
Do you think that is something inherent with product leadership roles, or just, the nature of the companies that you found yourself in?
I certainly don't think it's unique to product or product leadership roles, but I think it is inherent to it to some degree. Product's a really hard job. You're probably one of the busiest people in any company that you work for. You probably have, some of the most responsibility of any individual in a company. And this is product managers at all levels, not just product leaders, heads of products. You are responsible for the ongoing success of the company. You're working to try and solve problems for people in ways that make the company money, that make the company more successful in some way. And often the success of entire companies hinges on what these people are doing. And I don't think that that's overstating it. It's not to say that everyone else's jobs are unimportant. That's not the case at all. But I think it's a very high stress job. And it's the type of role that is very hard to make an impact quickly. So it can take a long time if you come into a new product role. It can take a long time before you have a good understanding of the customers and their needs and the product and the tech and where the gaps are and where the technical debt is, and maybe you've got to pay down some of that stuff before you can really get to the thing that you want to do. And you've got to win support from various people and get them to trust you and, build a vision and start taking everybody in a direction. You're, with the best will in the world, you're never going to come into a company and do all of that stuff within 12 months. It's going to take longer than that.
The word inherent complexity is something I always think about related to product leadership, because it's, unless you're managing, let's say, a really simple single feature B2C product, which even that, to take Instagram early days, like even that is now a very complex product, the algorithm and, working with influencers, partnerships, all this stuff. I think there's just inherent complexity, as you said, because you're touching upon so many things. It's data, technical understanding. It is design understanding, business understanding. How do all the products fit together? Or the competitive landscape just changed again. Like, what do we do about that? New technology comes in. It's just one of those. You just have to deal with a lot of stuff. And I think it's one of the reasons that I went down the solo. I mean, I was always going to go back into entrepreneurship, but I sort of had a taste of product leadership, had a product in startup, and then just said, this is not for me because of, the complexity, as you say, that the trying to have an impact, but really feeling like, the best you're going to get is very small incremental changes. And I think it also depends on the person to some extent, right? I think some people like being that, that connector. They like the stakeholder management. They like the buzz of being in an office and sort of reacting to things that come up. But for many people, it's just not a good fit. I think it's been my conclusion.
I think there was a point in time where I really liked that as well, where I really enjoyed that. To some degree, actually, I think remote work I'm probably not that well suited to remote work. I think product management in particular is very hard to do for most people to do very well in a purely remote environment.
I was
And
going
I
to ask
say this
about,
as someone who is a big supporter of remote work, by the way.
yeah, the way you phrased it was very interesting. You said it quite recently. This, you said this sort of realization, I think, is becoming more acute, right? Reaching I suppose, a crisis point. Yeah. Do you think that is because of remote work? Is it because of your companies being under stress? Let's say the last 2 years financially. Where do you,
For
or
me
is it just,
personally, why
yeah?
it
What do you
became
think?
more acute? I think, look, I can't pin it all on remote work. It's been a sense of that's been there for some time for me, and there are compounding factors or things change that make it feel more acute. I wouldn't, even if I was staying in product now, I don't think there's any way now that I would ever take a role that required me to be in an office somewhere 5 days a week. But I do think that for product management in particular, it's so much about people. It's so much about that alignment and the relationships and building connections, particularly in product leadership. And all product management roles to some degree have an element of leadership in them. You've got a vision or a direction that we're going to go in, and you need to kind of rally people and get them pulling along with you. Some people are very, very good at doing that remotely. My wife is very, very good at doing that remotely, at building those relationships remotely. She's also an introvert, so it works very, very well for her because she can dip her toe in the water and then she can kind of come back and have that space that she needs and that sort of quieter time. I would say I'm not an introvert. I'm someone who gets a buzz from being around people. So I think it was just one thing. And as I say, I'm a big advocate for remote work. But for me personally, I think it was one compounding factor that just made everything that a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, understood. A study came out, you may have seen this beginning of the year. 66% of senior product managers want to quit their job, i.e. they're actively looking to move company.
Yeah, it was the number
Yeah.
one goal.
So CNBC study, I mean, it's a news organization, so how much can we trust it? But it's not surprising when product people hear it. Number one in the list of all jobs people are looking to move from. All jobs. Number one. What do you think about that? Because, we've talked about your personal experience, but there is a trend there. I've spoken to 600 product people the last 4 or 5 years. I've seen, particularly the last year, a big shift in people, let's say, looking to get out of product. It's why I started Break Free, new business this year. What do you think about that? And why now?
So I think it's not surprising for all the reasons that we've talked about up to this point. I think it's a very high stress, very demanding role, and that's true at any time. I'd be surprised if the remote working hasn't played a part in it to some degree, but I don't think that's the thing. And as I say, I think it works really well for some people, and I think 100% in the office is totally the wrong way to go. So I'm against that. I think the economic climate, the downturn that we've seen over the last few years has played a really big role in that. You're moving from a place where lots of money was flying around, lots of investment was being made. Lots of companies were starting up, lots of product roles were available. There was lots of choice in the market. And there were also there was a lot being invested into trying new, highly innovative things. And as someone, who's worked in product both before and then through and after that period, for sure I saw the change in the attitudes of founders, of CEOs, in terms of the type of work that we're doing. It was a definite shift. It was all about, let's not take so many risks. Let's try and make incremental improvements. Let's try and tweak a bit more out of this flow. That what would hopefully normally be a balanced portfolio, a balanced product roadmap where you've got some bigger bets and some safer things, trended a lot more towards the safer end of things.
This I think ties in with, when we look at that study, I find it very interesting that it's senior product managers specifically.
Yeah.
We are not talking about all product people. And I see two things happening. I mean, more than two, but two big things that jump out to me. I think one is the gap of expectation. So like yourself and like myself that started my product career, I go, well, that looks really cool. Like, I want to be a head of product because you make all the decisions and you get to build cool stuff, right? And you manage lots of people and it looks awesome and you're paid loads of money. And then as you climb up, you realize all the sort of fun stuff that I've read about of doing discovery and running experiments and all that stuff, I can't do that in my company. By my fifth job, I can't do that in any of these companies. And there are obviously product-led companies, but extremely rare. I think particularly in Europe, maybe 10% from anecdotal evidence. So I think there's that expectation which is not met, and there's a realization it may never be met as you get more senior. So I suspect that is why we see senior PMs quite frustrated. And I think the second thing you said is that was then made more acute by a downturn where leadership is essentially saying, I don't want you doing any product. Well, I really want you to do project management. I'm telling you what to build and I want you to build it quickly and effectively. And then a third element is that, we like being in control of our lives, and it is a comforting narrative to say, if I work hard and deliver results, I'm always going to have a job in this company. And suddenly with layoffs, that was not the case, because you could have been an absolute rock star, but if your department's cut, you're going to lose your job. So I think there's a few factors at play, but not all new. I suppose it's just a magnifying of an existing problem there.
Sure. And to some degree, if you're a senior PM, the more senior you are, the higher the likelihood you've been doing this for some time, right? Product is a role, I think, that it has the potential to grind you down over time. It can be a grind, it can be exhausting, it can be relentless. I don't think it's so much the kind of money, the financial incentive for product people. Product people are still relatively very well paid and have continued to be from my experience. There are certainly fewer jobs out there. There are fewer options, but
you're looking 3-4x the national average. I mean, it's a well-paid job. Yeah,
it's a very well-paid job, but to be successful in product, it takes. I mean, I forget who it was that said this. Probably lots of people have said this, but product management is one of those jobs where often, as a product manager, you're not creating anything yourself, right? You've got the developers writing the code, you've got product designers producing designs, you've got the team kind of implementing and operationalizing these things. You're bringing all of these things together. You're trying to organize all of these different groups of individuals and this different effort towards a common goal to bring it together, to build a whole. And so if you put strain on the rest of the business and you put strain on all of these different other departments and start taking people away and people losing their roles, then, people are going to be less open when a product manager comes over and says, hey, I know this is not your day job, but, I need you to do this new thing, or, come to my workshop, or whatever. It puts that pressure on everything. I don't think you can point to any one thing, but it's already a very stressful, high pressure role. And so when this type of thing, there isn't a lot of, there's not a lot of room, there's not a lot of tolerance, I guess.
Yeah.
and it feels like it's kind of been pinched and pressured from lots of different directions. And so, I'm not surprised. There comes a point at which, you can be paid all the money in the world, but you're just unhappy. And yeah, so I wasn't surprised to read that at the time.
If you're enjoying this episode and want to get each shiny new episode straight to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast, please subscribe using the subscribe button below. So you've recently quit product and are doing sort of horticulture courses. I know you're working a few days a week in that area. There's a really nice quote by Steve Jobs, which has actually informed my decision this year in sort of changing direction with my career. But quote, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do." How much is that? You said you're coming from a position of feeling drained, right? Disillusioned by the product world. How much is that sort of thinking of, we talk about sort of like follow your passion and do what you love, but how much has that informed what you're doing now and this shift in career?
I think so. You sent over that statement to me, and I kind of smiled when I read it. I think there's a couple of different ways of taking that statement. I would say I agree with it up to a point, but I think the problem with that statement, the only way to do great work is to love what you do, and others like it, there's lots of advice here that's just find your passion, just find the thing that you love, and do that, and you'll magically somehow make money from it, right? I think the problem with that is a lot of people look at that and it creates a huge amount of pressure and a bit of an unrealistic expectation, in my opinion. You just need to find the thing that you love. I think most people have no idea what that thing is. How
did you make that decision though? So you go into, you say, okay, I'm going to quit product, I'm going to go into something else. So talk me about I agree. How do you apply the thinking?
I'll come on to that in a minute, but just to kind of finish the point around this, I think, I actually don't think that you should try to find the thing that you love. I don't think that you should put so much pressure on yourself to try and find the one thing that is your purpose and your passion in life. I think you just need to find something that when you do it, it makes you feel good and it gives you energy. I think there are two types of things. There are things that take your energy, that drain your energy, and there are things that give you energy. And just find things that give you energy. And if you spend time doing those things, then you'll find purpose. I think that purpose follows action, and that you first need to take some action in order to find your purpose. I don't think it's something you can think your way out of or into. So that was kind of key for me. So how did I make the change? So I started last year by making just a mental list of things that I thought I was good at and the things that I thought I enjoyed doing. Not necessarily the same list. There was some overlap between those. And I came up with a list of things. I love coaching people. I also like being outside in nature. I like things that have some sort of physical element to them. Especially with product management, it's a desk job. I'm sat in this office in front of a computer all day. It doesn't necessarily make me feel good. I like helping people, various things I think I'm sort of good at. And then I tried to think of possible careers and opportunities that overlapped with those things. And important to realize that there was never going to be any one career that ticked every single one of those boxes, right? I'm not going to, what's the job that gets me coaching people, but being outside in nature and maybe I could be a personal trainer. I don't know, but, yeah. So I didn't kind of put pressure on myself to find one thing that ticked those. I just came up with a list of like possible careers. And I came up with three for me. One was something around coaching, whether it was product coaching or life coaching or management coaching or something like that, something around coaching, because that was something I really enjoyed doing. Another was just some kind of outdoors based work. No idea what. Still, if I'm honest, not entirely sure what that is, but horticulture, gardening, landscaping, those types of things. And then the third was starting my own business, but that had to be something that helped people in some way. But I think part of my disillusionment with products over the years has been, what is this all for? Every founder, or most founders, will tell you that they're really changing people's lives with their products. For most products, that's not true. Most product people, most of product management is about trying to make someone somewhere more money, trying to make shareholders or a founder more money, make them richer. I'm sure maybe you improve the customers' lives in some small way through doing that, but it's not really about helping people. So that was my third thing, start my own business that help people in some way. And then I just started reaching out to people, either in my network or people I met who I thought could give me some insight into those things. So I reached out to you. That was how we connected. And really, there were two boxes. There were two of those points that was ticking. One was the coaching, because I knew that was a huge part of what you were doing with Prod MBA. And the other was starting my own business, because I'd seen that you'd been through that journey. I reached out to other people who, I know do coaching in my network. And we had a tree surgeon come around to our place last year in September. And I just asked him, I just said, hey, how did you get into this? I work in tech, I'm looking to get out of it, etc., etc. We had a chat, and at the end of that conversation, I said to him, so no idea if I'm going to do this, but if I pull the trigger and I quit my job and I stop working in tech at some point, and I give you a call, would you give me a start? Would you give me some work? And he just said, yeah, I would. That was something my wife encouraged me to do, was just ask, which I think is an incredibly powerful thing. This unlimited upside of asking. Everybody I reached out to and I asked for help, without exception, gave me their time, gave me the benefit of their advice and their experience, and that was really humbling. So those were my first steps.
It's I think it's such a powerful moment, because, and I want to talk about other ways, risk mitigation generally in a second, because obviously, leaving a career behind, there are financial implications, psychological, relationship implications. Because what just by having that conversation, you were able to then say, like, I have a path towards gaining experience, and then ultimately some sort of paid work there. So you can then go to yourself, well, there's a path forward, right? Rather than quit my job. Oh my God, what am I going to do? It's really scary. Oh my God, my finances are running down. And I found what is even more interesting is you did end up following then that path. Right? That's primarily just sort of the thread that you're on now. Talk to me about other ways you mitigated risk. We've talked about this before, but things like, conversations with your wife, financial planning, the fear as well that comes with the big change like that. Talk to me about risk mitigation.
So yeah, as you say, one thing is just once you start asking these kind of questions, you realize, well, it will be okay. There are people who are willing. This guy met me for the first time, and he's willing to, pay me to do some work for him. So that's some risk mitigation. That's some, that in itself is a useful exercise. It makes you realize that you have options. Those points you mentioned financially. So, finance money is something that my wife and I, shortly after we first met, we talked about and just agreed to make this a thing that we talk about. I think so many couples don't talk about money. And, as you know, one of the business that I experimented with was money coaching. And that was one of the insights that I had from that, because I was talking to people who, people who have been in relationships for years that didn't know what their partner earned, or didn't know what they spent their money on. And, that can be a source of conflict for a lot of people. So that was something that my wife and I actually started having conversations about very early on, and we were already quite on top of our budget. And we budgeted together. So from a financial perspective, in mitigating this risk, we rebudgeted. We sat down, we made a list of all of our outgoings, and then we were really ruthless in saying, line by line, do we really need this? If it's our mortgage, our electricity bill, of course we need this, we have to pay this. But then we had a Netflix subscription, we had an Amazon Prime subscription, we had a Sky subscription. There were various other things, and I think everybody has these things. And so we just listed out, what do we really need? If we have to cut things, and we have to be really ruthless, what can we cut? So that exercise, we added all of that up monthly, and we just had a big number at the end of it, the things that we can't afford to stop spending our money on. And then we compared that to my wife's salary, and then the amount of money that was left over, the shortfall, if you like, that became the freedom number. That became the number that I had to be contributing as an absolute minimum in order for us to cover our outgoings. And then we added a little bit to that, a little bit for contingency, slash, can we take a holiday once a year? Not big expensive holiday, but just something so that it feels sustainable. So that was kind of how we mitigated the financial side of things.
Would you be happy to share that number? Because I think it's important for people to realize it's more attainable than they. Obviously, it depends on partner's income, savings,
Sure.
but I find, for example, speaking to clients, I ask, one of the first questions I'll ask is, what is your, as you know, right, what is your freedom number? I.e., how much do you need to earn to quit your job and live frugally, but be able to then go all in your business? Usually it's around 3,000 to 4,000 euros for people pre-children generally, but sometimes it's 1,000 euros, right? It can be really quite low.
So for us, cutting everything and, with no contingency and just covering our outgoings, it's £1,000.
Nice.
That was the shortfall. We doubled that to give us A, contingency, and B, as I say, a holiday, that type of thing. So it was £2,000
per month.
Per month.
Yeah.
So £2,000 per month is a 30k salary.
Yeah, and just for people listening, it's again, whether it's starting a business or, say, for example, Rob, if you were like, okay, well, I'm just going to do some freelance on the side to sort of get going, or consulting, 1,000 a month is very, very doable, particularly if you're leveraging, in your case, a very good 16 to 20 year skill set. And it's one of these questions where people might go, and that there will be people listening who go, I really want to quit product and do something else, but I just can't afford it, or it's too scary. And I think just having a tangible number that you can go, okay, I just need to hit that, and then I can quit my job. And again, you don't need to do that before you quit your job as well, right? You were in the fortunate situation where you said, right, I'm going to take time out, support from your wife on that. But in many cases, it's going to be actually stay in the job, build something on the side, and then when you hit that 2,000 a month, then you can quit product as a career.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the reason I decided to quit, I talked at the start of our conversation about how I was feeling, that I've been feeling like this for a long time, the impact it was having on my health and well-being, and on our relationship as well, because not having that energy left to, I had nothing kind of left to give, to put into our relationship, the short amount of time we had together at the end of the day. We have a young son as well. That can be exhausting. So A, it felt really pressing for me, and B, I think I've realized over the years that I'm at my best when I can put all of my energy and attention and focus into one thing. The more I try to multitask, the more I spread myself across multiple things, the less progress I feel that I make, and the more stressed and overwhelmed I feel. And that's been a really important insight for me. That kind of just knowing myself, realizing that for me, the option of trying to do this in my spare time, working a full day as a head of product, having a young son, and then trying to build something from scratch or start something to reach my freedom number in whatever time I had left, for me personally, wasn't viable. For some people, that absolutely will be. And there are plenty of people out there that do it. But yeah, that wasn't going to be viable for me. So the financial thing was really important because once we realized what this number was, we then had to work towards building up some kind of amount of money. As I said, we had these conversations really early on, and so we were already regularly saving money. We had some amount of money saved. We just needed to save a little bit more in order to give myself some buffer. And originally we were looking at like a 6 months. Can I that £1,000? Can we get £6,000 together? That gives me 6 months where I can be earning zero, effectively. And it was never going to be the case I was earning absolute zero from day one, but I could, in theory, afford to have 6 months completely unpaid, where I, go off and figure this thing out. So that was the financial thing. What the other things you mentioned? Psychological relationship.
The relationship's an important one, right? I've had a conversation with my wife this year. I'm sort of changing direction, so income drops. We've also got a young child. There needs to be conversation there, right? To sort of manage expectation and also get support along this new path. Psychological. Let's talk about that though. It's scary to say I've built 20 years in one area and then sort of start from zero in something else. How did you? Well, were you scared? Was there fear there? How did you sort of manage that in a conversation?
There's definitely fear there. I think there's a few things. I think about running. So anyone who has ever been for a run knows the feeling they get when you wake up in the morning and you realize you've got to go out for your run, and how strong the pull can be to stay in bed and to avoid that, to sleep an extra 10 minutes, to procrastinate and do other things, right? The hard thing is not the run. The hard thing is putting your shoes on and walking out the door. And I think that's a parallel in so many other things, right? The hard thing is not the actual hard work, the effort that you need to put in to make that career change. It's taking that first step. That's the thing that's scary. Once you start taking action, taking steps in a direction, it automatically becomes less scary. So my first steps, as I was saying before, was just reaching out to people that I knew that were aligned with these 3 ideas that I had and having conversations with them. How did you do it? What help can you offer me? Can you give me any advice or, that type of thing? Automatically, it started becoming less scary because I realized that, there were people who were going to help me out, that I had options, that there were routes there. I think the other factor for me was realizing that this was a 2-way door decision. It's not a 1-way door. If I can set aside enough money that I can afford to not work for 6 months and not be earning, or even less than that, even 4 months, let's say, if you can save up enough money to do that, then you can always go back. right? Just go out there, treat it as an experiment. I mean, in products, we're experimenting all the time. Just treat it as a series of experiments. Go out and try things, see how it makes you feel, see if you think there's some traction or some wins there, and follow that process along. So when you reframe it as that rather than a career change, it sounds kind of big and scary, but for me this year is about experimenting, going out and trying things, and realizing that if it all goes horribly wrong, if my wife lost her job tomorrow, um, you know, she'll get a notice period or whatever. I'll go back and I'll try and find another job in product. If that's what I have to do, I'll do it. I've been doing this for 16 years. I know the market is tough, but I'm sure I'll find a role if I have to, right? So it's a two-way door decision, and that was that plus taking some action, taking some steps. Those are the two key things on the psychological side of things.
Yeah, it's sort of, I was thinking of mapping the terrain, right? Because when you start, you're going, I've got no idea about anything really. What's ahead, what the options are. The map is dark, and then you sort of by small step, okay, have conversations, start maybe a bit of research online, sort of see what the terrain is, and then I really like that wording, sort of mapping the route, right? So you start sort of putting flags ahead of you, like you would with the product, and say, okay, if I just get to there, then I can go to the next goal, and then to the next goal. That's and the next goal.
And you don't need to map out the whole route, right? You just need to know what's the very next step that I'm
using. Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. And I think coming back to that financial one as well, because there will be people that go, well, if only I had a wife that was earning good money that could support, balance the books for us.
Yeah.
But, when I was, I was in Berlin 7 years ago doing consultancy work, earning good money, like 100K, but we lived in a 42 square meter apartment. I didn't buy a desk. I bought like a literally plank of wood and then nailed it onto some, but everything was really cheap. It's secondhand furniture. We cycled everywhere. We ate out maybe like once a week, whilst all my colleagues were, going out for lunch every day and drinks. And it was by doing that, and it also didn't feel like a sacrifice. I still had a social life, still did the things I wanted to do, but it was just quite deliberate about having a very high savings rate, because that then gave me the cushion to go, I can now go and take risks, or I can do 2 days a week rather than 5. And that space and sort of that power you feel of going like, right, I can now be in control of, what I want to do ultimately. And I think that, anyone, even if you live in somewhere like London, very expensive, cycle, don't get Ubers everywhere, right? Don't, go out 100%. To clubs and bars where you're going to spend 100 quid in a night out. Just, and not, I'm not saying don't do any of that. Don't go into monk mode. You don't necessarily need to, but there are always ways that you can cut down or save as sort of lifestyle creep comes into your life. I want to change gears and talk about the sort of start of your entrepreneurial journey. I think very early on, but I think there's still, there are valuable lessons for people getting started. So you're currently doing horticultural course. This is your main focus at the moment. We've worked together. So you did a break free sprint with me. I don't want to use this to sort of like sell that process, but generally working on a business idea and getting it actually to 4 sales, I think it was within the first few days or a week or so. What did that teach you? What were sort of key lessons from actually getting out there, putting an idea out there, asking people for money and seeing that people are actually willing to pay you?
I think, a lot of things. I mean, it forced me to stop making excuses. And having someone who has done this before, almost sort of holding your hand and helping to walk you through the process, is very useful and encouraging. But it also is it creates a lot of accountability. A lot of the things that I was doing because that's the process. I've been told to do it. You kind of you end up just following this process and trusting in that process. So I would think, I think trust the process is one thing that it taught me. And just going out and taking some action and not continuing to make excuses. That power of asking, coming back to that, the first sale that I made was actually to my sister. I remember it being, I remember how incredibly scared I was taking that step. I reframed it. I realized that, I speak to customers every single day. I ask people things every single day. And I realized that I needed to stop thinking about it as being a salesperson. Just start thinking about this as any other customer interview. I'm talking to someone, I'm trying to understand the problems that they're having and the needs, the underserved needs, and all of these things. And then if there's a painful enough problem there, then there's something I can help with at the end of it. And that doesn't feel so salesy, right? So that was game changing for me, I think, because I told myself, I'm not a salesperson. I hate that shit. I hate when people sell to me. It feels kind of gross. I think I realized just by doing it, just by starting to have that conversation instead of worrying about it, that it wasn't really like that at all. And I think also, the process is a pretty repeatable one. It's not going to work for every type of business. There are slight, tweaks or changes that you might need to make to it, depending on the type of business. But generally speaking, most of those steps and will work, I think, for most types of businesses. And once you've done it once, the confidence that you can do it again and again is just grows exponentially. So
there's two things I want to jump into there. Sorry, first is there's an episode coming out just before yours with Thibaut Souris, who is a sales expert. He does a really good job of breaking down all of these misbeliefs we have about sales, just tearing down all the excuses, particularly that product people make. But I'll talk about that in that episode. So do give it a listen. It will be out next week. I think the second thing I really expected in your case, Rob, is I talked a lot when we did this sprint, right, about you're not wedded to your business idea. So for anyone that isn't aware, Breakthrough, you come work with me individually. I'll coach you and we'll go from basically zero to getting real revenue with an idea. That doesn't mean you have to build that as a business. You're basically saying, is there a business here, full stop? Is there potential? Is it feasible as a business? And like yourself, it's like, okay, make a few sales, deliver the solution, and then go, you know what, that's not what I want to do long term. That's completely fine. Completely fine. And it's just about stepping back and saying, okay, great, but I've got the process now to go and, whether that's working with us or any other process, I've just got a repeatable process to go explore ideas, because we don't know if we're going to enjoy that until we go and do it. We don't know if people are going to pay us money until we do it. We don't know whether people are going to get value until we deliver the solution. And I really like how you went forward with it and then said, no, there's something there, but I'm going to be patient and try some other things. So talk to me about your again, obviously very early in your entrepreneurial career, but you will get there. I'm really not worried about you finding the right idea and building a business. How do you think now about the next steps and the kind of business you want to build, for example?
I read something on the James Clear newsletter. Maybe it was the last one or the one before, and he talked about, I forget the exact term he used, but he talked about kind of overlapping. Trying to if you've got multiple things that you enjoy doing or that you want to do, try to overlap them wherever possible. So one of the examples in his newsletter was, if you like exercising and you like spending time with your partner, what's some exercise that you can do with your partner, right? Is there some activity that you guys can do together? You get two birds with one stone. So for me, at the moment, the road that I'm going down is sort of horticulture, outdoors. I'm studying horticulture at the moment. I'm working, doing sort of tree surgery and landscaping work right now. And so I think that the business that, I need to start needs to overlap with that. The first business idea that I tested was money coaching. And, that ticked the coaching box. So, there was a really, and, the financial side of things is something that, as I said earlier, we've got our own process for that. And so I know what that looks like. I know how to help people in that regard. But the actual delivery of it was more of the same thing that I'm trying to get away from. It was more of sitting here in front of a computer, being indoors, the same type of work, and I was getting the same type of feeling from the delivery. And I just had a strong sense that, yes, there's a viable business here. Yes, I could build it. But I think I would wake up in 6 months' time and go, oh, shit, my life is the same. I'm doing this again. And so
replaced one set of processes with another.
Exactly. There's a really nice endpoint in your process, or a really nice, not endpoint, but there's a really nice point where you go out and you make your first sale, and then you work your ass off to deliver that. And then the next step after that is, let's go and build the audience, build content, start putting this out there, building the brands, that type of thing. And so that was a really nice point for me to go, well, actually, before I jump into this, before I start associating myself on the internet, on LinkedIn, on social with this thing, with this brand, with this business, how did I feel about the delivery of it? Did I really enjoy that process? Can I see myself doing that over and over again? And for me, the answer was no. But I think that works really well. And something I really, really like. I know Daniel Priestley kind of, his method almost flips those. He's like, build the audience first and build the brand first. That's great if you've got a really strong sense about what the thing is that you want to do. But if you find yourself putting all of that time and effort into building that audience and that content, and then you go and live it and you realize it's not actually scratching your itch, then you waste a lot of upfront time. So I really liked that.
I think that's such a key point, because that is the narrative at the moment, is build audience and then find a problem that they have and build a solution for it. I think it's 100%. That's the way to do it. However, before that, as you said, one, you need to be sure, like, are they going to pay for something? Because there are audience. I started a business in backpacking back in the day. Backpackers do not spend a freaking penny online. For beers and nights out and activities wherever, in Thailand in person, they'll spend money, but they are not going to pay for some online app. And so one is, is are you in a good industry, right, where there's revenue potential? And then the second one, as you say, is like, are you really, as you say, passion is not the word, but do you have a sustained interest in this area? Because if not, don't do it. I thought a long time about doing this podcast, and I said, I can see myself in 10 years, in 20 years, still being interested about solopreneurship, micro businesses, and that process, and the psychology as well around that. So therefore, I'm going to commit to the podcast, because this will be a long slog. I mean, I'm enjoying it, but it's a lot. You're looking at 100, 500 episodes eventually, 10 years, 20 years. And then, as you say, then you can start thinking about sort of like longer term audience building. And
but you can do 10 of these, right? And
you can also do
know 10 whether you enjoy it or not,
exactly.
Whether it's a thing that gives you energy or takes your energy away.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, 20 episodes is where I'm going to sort of assess and see, what do I do with this moving forward, and probably crack on to 100. But yeah, I love that, and I think it's. What else is very refreshing in your case is you're looking at, let's say horticulture. You're just starting out, right? You're doing courses in this area. You have an interest, but you're not an expert yet. And I think many people would go, well, okay, so how am I uniquely placed to run a business in this space? In your case, it would be easy to go, well, I'm not, right? I'm sort of a beginner, and maybe I'll do a few years working with someone, but I actually think, coming with your product and tech background and then blending that with being very focused and getting skillful very quickly at different areas of horticulture. I like that there's sort of just I trust that I'm probably going to find a way there.
I mean, when I joined Simply Cook, I knew nothing about meal kit subscription businesses.
Yeah.
Right. I know a huge amount about meal kit subscription businesses now. You know, and the same is true of every company I've joined. I really like what Tim Ferriss said on this. You know, if you read the top 5 books in any subject, you're automatically an expert compared to the rest of the population. In that subject, you have more knowledge than 98% of the rest of the population about that thing. So expert is relative, A, and B, product people do this all the time. They learn about these different businesses. They learn about the intricacies, the complexities of these different things. But I don't think you can. Yeah, that's definitely not a barrier. The only barrier is whether you enjoy it, whether it makes you feel good. And I think the only way to answer that, the only way to know is to do it, is to go out there and actually try it. You're not going to think your way out of this problem. You know, you can buy as many books as you like on designing your life and, you know, sit there and make notes and make lists. That's a good starting point. That was my starting point. But at some point, I think you have to take some action. You have to start trying some things. See it as a series of experiments and see what feels right. And that's how you figure it out.
I think it's a really good place to wrap up. In a way, you've answered my last question, but let's see if you have any other thoughts or maybe another direction here. What one piece of advice would you give? Because there will be a lot of people going, I want to do what Rob's done. I'm fed up with product career. Earning enough money, that's not the problem. I'm dissatisfied. I'm tired of this and want to change direction. What one thing would you recommend they do? One piece of advice?
Well, as ever, there's not just one thing. I could get it down to two things. I could get it down to 2 things. The 2 things for me, one was finances. Get your finances sorted. If you don't have a budget, do one. And be as ruthless as you feel you can be. And make that a shared thing. If you have a partner, if you live with your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever they are, do that together, because it will avoid all of that potential resentment that can come from that process, right? Figure out what that freedom number is. That's the first thing, and work towards getting yourself, you know, some small amount of money. If you can, you know, if you can even get 3 or 4 months worth of your freedom number saved up. And honestly, I believe for most people, that's not as big as you think it is. So that would be one thing that I would say. If you don't know what that is already, do that and figure it out. And then the second thing is just start taking some steps in some directions that you want to find out more about. Ask people for their advice, for their help. You know, take some small action in the direction. Realize that the only way for most people that you're going to figure out what your real purpose is in life, what that thing is that you love doing and that you will do for the rest of your life, is by going out there and trying it, and find some way of doing that in whatever way you can. That works for you to do it in your spare time, to do half an hour every morning or an hour every morning. If you're someone who can do that, then do that. That's your step. If you're someone who can't do that and you're someone like me, you need to throw yourself at something, then you need to get a few months of your freedom number saved up and, you know, quit your job and go do it. Realize it's a 2-way door decision. You can always come back. These things are never as scary as you think they are once you actually start doing them. It's the thought of doing something that's scary, right? It's not the actual thing itself. So that would That would be my advice. Maybe that's 3, but I did
No,
my
that's
best.
great. I was smiling because I remind myself of that a lot. That
Yeah.
the thought of something is much worse than the reality, applicable in every part of life. Rob, it's been really fun having this conversation. Been also just interesting following this journey. Right, we had that conversation, I think, before you left your role, seeing you sort of go into this entrepreneurial, following what you're interested in, and as I said, I am very confident in your future and sort of excited for you, in fact, as well, getting away from product career and all the sort of lifestyle changes that are going to come with it. So thanks so much for the time. And I think it's been really valuable for people in a similar situation.
Yeah. Thanks, Henry. Thanks for taking the time and inviting me on. And yeah, it's been really fun.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Refounders. If you enjoyed this episode and want to get each shiny new episode straight to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast, please subscribe using the subscribe button below. If you're feeling generous, why not share with a friend?